famous recipe for Hamantaschen, which I got from my mother, and she got it from a neighbor, but I've been making it forever, and it's not that difficult, so here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is preheat the oven to 350. There we go. And then we'll mix up the dough. In here I have combined 2½ cups of flour, 2½ teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The first step is to cream the shortening and the sugar. Okay, so here is the 1/3 cup of shortening, vegetable shortening. Now I use the Aldi equivalent of Crisco. Some people don't like vegetable shortening. I have used coconut oil, but I didn't like it as much, frankly. And I don't think margarine would work all that well. So vegetable shortening really is the best choice. Let me get the sugar. My 1/2 cup measure. Half cup of sugar. I'm going to put these in my KitchenAid to mix it up. Cream the shortening and the sugar. Okay, now we're adding a 1/4 cup of honey in here and a tablespoon of lemon juice. And we'll keep mixing that real well. It has a little trick with the honey. You might want to measure it in a liquid measuring cup, but it's helpful if you first spray it with nonstick spray, or I used a measuring cup that had the shortening in it before, and so it was nice and greasy, and when you do that, the honey just slides right out. You don't have to worry about scraping it out in a measuring cup. Okay, so the shortening and the sugar and the dry ingredients and the honey and lemon are creaming. Then the directions say to add part of the flour, then the eggs, then the rest of the flour. So there's 2 eggs that I've brought to room temperature, and my 2½ cups of flour mixed with the baking powder and the salt. Okay, I'm mixing in the dry ingredients. It's going nicely. Then I'll add the eggs. 1, 2. Now I was going to break the eggs into the little dish because I know that's what a lot of people do, but I've read that when you buy commercial eggs, there's no chance that they're going to be fertilized, so now I'm going to mix in the eggs. I'm going to mix in the rest of the flour. Give that a good mix. Now I'm going to get my workspace ready. When I lived in my house in Oak Park, I always used the kitchen table for this stuff, but here we recently moved, well, almost a year ago, we moved to a condo in Midtown next to the art museum, and we have a little teeny weeny table where we eat most of our meals, and our big dining room table. I no longer have a good kitchen table to work at, so I put up this temporary folding table. I used to use a sheet as my workspace, which is something my mother always did. And it works well for me. Since we moved, I don't have any leftover old sheets anymore, so I'm using a tablecloth. Okay, so here is my tablecloth covered table, and you want to have your source of flour nearby because you're going to need a lot of flour to work into the surface to keep the dough from sticking. Here's the dough. I'm going to take about 1/3 of it to start with. Put the rest back in the bowl. I'm going to cover it with a damp paper towel to keep it from drying out. So here's a piece of dough. I'm just going to knead it a tiny bit. And I'm going to roll it out with a rolling pin. You want to get it pretty thin, probably about 1/4 inch or maybe even less. Because as good as this dough is, you don't want doughy Hamantaschen. You want them to be crispy and just thick enough to hold in the filling. Roll from the center out to the edge. sense for how thick it is by just feeling it. Then you want to cut rounds. You can use a cookie cutter, but I've always used a drinking glass. It works really well and it's about the right size. So I use that as a cookie cutter. Make the rounds. You want to cut as many as you can from your first rolled out bit so you don't have to roll out anymore. And if you get a little cut in one of them, you can paste it together with your fingers. So then get rid of the extraneous dough. Pick it up again, wad it all up into a ball, and you're going to put that back in with the dough that's in your bowl, covered with a damp paper towel to use in the next go round. Okay, now we're going to fill them and shape them. The shaping is probably the trickiest thing, but it's not difficult. I like to use solo pie filling. The only one I can find this year is cherry. I prefer poppy seed or apricot or raspberry, but you can get whatever flavor you like. My son was on my case about making real filling out of real ingredients, and I told him I just didn't have time, but of course you can do that if you like, and I'll be happy to give you some tips if you want them. So take a teaspoon and put a little dab in the center of each of your rounds. Can't really tell you exactly how much to use because it depends on the size of your rounds. But you want to have enough so you can taste it, but not so much that you can't form the cookies. When our kids were young and living at home and we made a gazillion jalapenos packages, I used to make 2 double recipes of this recipe. Sometimes 2 double recipes and a single recipe. And we had dozens and dozens and dozens of Hamantaschen. Now that the kids are gone and we're no longer working to bring things in as goodies for our coworkers, and we can't even see people to give them little packages in person, I'm just making one single batch. So this recipe doubles well. I wouldn't make more than double it at one go though. Okay, there we go. I filled them all and now I'm going to shape them. This is the hardest part. You want to take 2 sides and pinch it up into a point. And then take the back and pinch it up into 2 more points. Go. Now you put them on an ungreased cookie sheet. Okay, I'm going to pop these in the oven while I work on the next batch. And we bake them for about 15 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. Okay. Take a little more flour. So while I'm working on the next batch, which I'll put on the oven when those come out, I thought I would share with you a little bit more about the story about this recipe. And you can also find that along with the recipe on my cooking blog. It's www.bobbiesbestrecipes, all one word.com. So, my mother made this recipe and she always told us she got it from her neighbor Ida Silver. One day, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, I was reading my Hadassah magazine and I came across an article called My Mother's Hamantaschen, and it was by a woman named Judy Davis, who I didn't know. But as I was reading it, she was talking about her upbringing in Philadelphia and other clues, and I realized that this was Judy Silver, Ida's oldest child. So I tracked her down because the article said she worked at University of Massachusetts, and I contacted her because the recipe that she put in the article was not my mother's Hamantaschen, which I thought she got from Ida Silver. So I contacted Judy, and she said she was really tickled by the story, that my mom made this recipe from her mother, and that I was making it too, and that was very nice. For 15 minutes, and they look perfect. So now you just want to hold them on a wire rack. If they're cool, you can have somebody taste it and go, yum. So here are the finished Hamantaschen, and now comes the ultimate test.
Wow! Look at that! That's fantastic! I wish it were Purim. May I eat this one? I can eat one. Mmm! That's delicious.
Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, please email me.